without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tim Hunt from the Open University, who's going to be talking about the new quiz activity in Moodle.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I suppose technically it's afternoon now. Thank you all for coming here. So, this is a project I've been working on for, I guess, about 18 months at the Open University. It's related to the quiz. When you have an online quiz system, it's a big complicated system, and it turns out you can sort of split it into two parts, really. The quiz itself is basically a lot of bookkeeping. You know, you say, here is a quiz, it's got these questions in these orders, and we want it in this course so these students can get at it, and when the student's done the quiz, we need to put the grade into the grade book. And that's all the sort of bookkeeping. And then you have the questions themselves that go into that quiz, and each question you can think about very separately, and sort of what happens when a student gets to this question, what do they see, what can they do, how do we grade their responses. You can think about that completely separately. And that separating it into two smaller problems makes the whole thing much easier to deal with. And the bit I've been working on for the last year or so is that bit about, you know, how the individual questions behave. So, is this behaving? I would like to do this. Just to add a little bit of background, I mean, why are we doing this? Why are we investing all this in the quiz? This is quite an interesting paper, if you like reading papers about learning and teaching. It addresses the question of how can the assessment in your course support the student's learning. Sadly, this paper comes up with a list of 11 things that assessment needs to do to really promote learning, which doesn't make a very good slide in a talk. But the question is, how can the quiz really help with this? And two ways the Moodle quiz can give feedback that's probably better than you as a human teacher could give, because obviously in many ways a human giving feedback on a student's work will be much better. But what the quiz can definitely beat you at is it can give the quiz the feedback much faster, because it can give the student the feedback there and then. And then if you've given the student the feedback there and then, well, you'd like the student to actually read the feedback and take it in, and you can do that by immediately giving the student another go. So if they've read the feedback and understood it, then they can have another go and they can get the question right if they got it wrong before. So it also ties into what Gráinne Connolly was saying in the keynote yesterday, which is look at the various different types of pedagogy and saying, depending on your situation, different types of pedagogy are more or less appropriate. The quiz, clearly the thing it's very strong at, it's no good at all the social constructivist stuff, but for the kind of basic drill and practice, it's you know, that's where its strong point is, giving students lots of practice, anyway. So what we're looking at here, this running on my laptop is the latest development code. I hope we don't hit any bugs today. But, you know, as Martin says, Moodle 2.1 is going to be released in June. So for me as a developer, that means if this is going to be included, it has to be finished by May the 31st. So it should be fairly bug-free by now, and I'm quite confident it is. So this is a quiz running in what is now called deferred feedback mode. And that is, in the quiz, well, I'm giving this presentation on the assumption that everyone is already familiar with the changes we made in Moodle 2. And from the last day or so, I know that a lot of people are still on Moodle 1.9. So you may be seeing a lot of things here that you aren't yet familiar with because they're new in Moodle 2. But to me, they've been there for quite a long time. So what we have now, in the quiz in Moodle 1.9, you used to have a sort of bar across the top to say where you were. Now we've moved that where are you now into this block on the right. And it shows you these are not showing you the pages in the quiz, these are actually linking you to individual questions and they're showing us we've put in an answer for question 1, we haven't yet answered question 2. So if you're used to Moodle, how Moodle 2 works, the quiz, in this quiz, which is now called deferred feedback, in the old sort of language it was what used to be called adaptive mode. No, actually not very much has changed. Also, I mean, in Moodle 2, once you've worked through all the questions in the quiz, you get to this summary page where you can just check that you've done everything before you do submit all and finish. And then, as I say, once you've submitted your quiz, well, it depends on the options the teacher has set, but you can immediately get your feedback and see how much you've learnt. And if you've got things wrong, you can think about why and read the feedback. So, as I say, that sort of deferred, what we call deferred feedback model, you answer all the questions, then you submit the whole thing, everything's graded, and you get all the feedback at once. That's been there in Moodle 1.9 and 2. It's been there from the start. Kind of the reason why we undertook this project to rewrite everything was, in a sense, to get this new thing that we call interactive behaviour. Let me just wipe what I've done. So, in an interactive quiz, you can see over here on the left, it tells us we've got 3 tries remaining at this question. So this question is, what is significant about the interactive behaviour? And it is perhaps unfair to ask you this because you haven't seen it yet. But let's take a guess. Well, we've already said that the strength of the quiz is the student can get their response graded immediately, and presumably they get some feedback. So now, with an interactive question, you've got a check button there, and we can just submit question 1 immediately, and we get a bit of feedback telling us we got 2 right. And then once you click try again, still within the same quiz attempt, you can try putting in a different answer. So, let's check that. As you can see, it was saying now tries remaining 2. Now we've selected 3 correct things, and the feedback down here now is different. We had a different message before, now it's just saying try again. Now we're down to 1 try remaining. And in the end, well, we got 5 right. It must be that they're all true. So if you keep getting the question wrong too often, then ultimately Moodle will stop you and say, right, that's enough. Okay, we'll give you a grade for the amount you did, but we'll now just tell you what the right answer is. So, there's the next button. I think this next button's in the wrong place, but I don't know where the right place is yet. So, if you're familiar with the Moodle quiz, and perhaps I should ask, of the people in the room, how many of you or people at your institution use the quiz in their teaching? All right, thank you. So it's about 2/3, I guess. So if you are familiar with the quiz already, you'll know that in Moodle 1, Moodle 2, there's this choice of whether the quiz is in adaptive mode or not. And the old Moodle adaptive mode is somewhat similar to this. The differences are really that with this new system, you can have different feedback after each attempt. So what we normally do in these questions at the Open University, we give students 3 tries, and if they get it wrong first time, we normally just say, that was wrong, try again. And then if they get it wrong a second time, we give them some more detailed feedback. Maybe it's like, if you're struggling with this question, go and read section 3 of the book, you know, or go and repeat this activity. Or maybe we give all the details in the feedback. And what we find, I mean, very, very rough but typical numbers. Typically we'll find about half the students will get a question right first time. After we've told them, no, that was wrong, think again about another, that'll get you, after that, about 2/3 of the students will have got it right. And then after the more detailed feedback, a few more students again will have done it, and then there'll always be some who just don't get it and have to, you know, and don't get it right in the end. So the old adaptive mode, you couldn't have different feedback after each try, and it kept going. In fact, with the old system, even with this, if you get it right first time, and can I get that right first time? I made this question, I should know the answer. Yes. So with this, once you've got the question correct, you get the feedback, but you don't get another go. With the old adaptive mode, if you'd got the question right, you could go on changing your answer and putting in wrong answers, which was rather odd, we felt. Another difference here, we've got a very clear thing. You click check, you get some feedback. You can't change your answer until you've clicked the try again button. So again, that's a slightly different workflow. So I say this sort of interactive model, it's actually something that we've used before Moodle. We had it in other computer marked assessment systems we used had this behaviour, and we found it worked really well with students, and we wanted it in Moodle. But we also know there are lots of people out there using the deferred feedback mode. That has its place. Lots of people currently use adaptive mode as it currently works. We can't just change that for them. So we needed to be able to add our interactive stuff to what was already there without making a big mess. And so a lot of the restructuring was to make it possible to do things like this as a sort of add-on rather than sort of having to change the core of Moodle. So let's have a look, as a teacher, how do you set this up? So let's just go and have a look at the quiz settings form, which, as most of you know, is a very long and scary form. But the thing to know about it is that you can ignore all the bits you don't actually need. You just have to learn what you can safely ignore. And the key thing is this new setting. This is what used to be adaptive mode, yes, no, and now it's how are questions going to behave in this quiz? And you have a choice of a bunch of them. And so the ones we've looked at and the ones that are sort of most important, I think, are this deferred feedback, the sort of classic exam, answer all the questions, you'll get the mark later, and this interactive feedback where you can be doing the activity and learning from the feedback. To pick up on Alec, it's a bit more game-like perhaps. It's learning from your mistakes there and then. And I'll talk about another one of these in a second. So really that's the thing. And therefore you can have a quiz and a whole lot of questions, and you can just decide to switch the whole thing from one mode to another. So you can take questions from the question bank and put them into a quiz that uses any of these behaviours, and it should work. Right, let's go. How am I doing for time? Now, the question is, you've got all these behaviours, how do you actually find out what on earth they do? And of course, you could go and read the documentation, but a more practical way of doing this is the thing that normally when you're in the question bank or when you're editing a quiz, there's a link to preview any question that just opens the question in a pop-up. And that's what we've got here. But now at the bottom of that pop-up, there are lots of options, all the things that can affect how that question would work when it's used in a quiz, we can set down here. So when you're doing the previewing, you can the way to find out what all these behaviours actually do is to go into the preview and try a question in all the different ways and see how it works out. So what we've got here is another of the new behaviours, which was something introduced to me by Tony Gardner-Medwin from just down the road at University College London, certainty-based marking. So here, above my cursor, we have a fairly standard multiple choice question that we're expecting the students to answer. And so they answer the question, but as well as giving the answer, they have to reflect on how confident are they that they've got the answer right. Are they guessing? Are they sure they got it right? And depending on how confident you feel you are in the answer, you will get it. So we've got this question right, and the question is marked out of 3, but because we weren't entirely sure, we weren't prepared to say, I'm absolutely sure I got this right, we've actually only been given 2 of the 3 possible marks. If I'd wanted to get the full 3 marks, let me start again. You have to get the question right, and you have to be very sure you're right. Oops, where's submit? But the risk there is if you, at one point I thought that this would be finished in time to go into Moodle 2, that turned out to be slightly naive. If you get it wrong, having expressed very high certainty, you get penalised with a very heavy negative mark. And the way these weights are set up, really, there's no way to cheat the system. The way to get the best score is to be accurate in your reflection on whether you are right or wrong. Tony, who I mentioned, he teaches doctors, he teaches medicine students, and I think it's very important for doctors to know when are they confident they are right, and when do they think they're right, but they really ought to go and look it up. And Tony's observation of using this sort of thing with students, he's sort of done his own customization of Moodle that implements this. To start with, students aren't very good at getting the right certainty, but as they do some quizzes like this, they get much better at judging when they're guessing and when they're really sure they're right. And as I say, the idea is to promote that sort of reflection on your certainty of knowledge. So that's really a very brief view of how it looks from the student and teacher point of view. I wanted to give a very quick overview of how it works behind the scenes. I appreciate that most people here aren't developers, but I think this is interesting. And so, I mean, I've only really included here how it looks in the new way. In the past, Moodle has always had a lot of different question types. So you could have a quiz, you could have multiple choice questions, short answer questions, numerical questions. We've always had that degree of flexibility, and there's always been a sort of bit in the middle of the system. The bit that's new is this bit over here called question behaviour, and it's sort of not clear you can do that. The only real cleverness I claim in this is working out how you divide the responsibilities so you can separate out this question of what are the sequence of steps the students go through and make that almost entirely independent of is this an essay question, is it a multiple choice question, is it a short answer question. It's finding where to draw the boundaries between these three parts of the system so everything works and the code is understandable and you're not restricted. I mean, I'm sure we all know, working in various institutions, that bureaucracies and restrictions on what you're allowed to do are deeply irritating and often make it impossible to get things done. I wanted to split down the sort of responsibility for presenting a question to a student into these three bits with very sort of clearly defined job responsibilities for each of the three bits, but without really limiting what was possible. And it took, I was thinking, I thought about the problem on and off for quite a long time, working on Moodle as quiz maintainer, fixing bugs. I could see it wasn't quite right, but finding a sort of breakdown that solved all the problems took a long time. It was actually when I was on holiday in Sydney, Australia, staying in a very nice hotel looking over the harbour, that I just sort of finally it all clicked. And that's probably enough about that. Sorry, one more thing. In the past, there's a question of which bit of the system is responsible for storing the data in the database. And in the past, all the different bits of the system were writing data in the database. Another simplification I made is now only the core of the system puts the data into the database. And an advantage of that is that is why I think this will be better for performance. It's much more streamlined. And also it means all this bit over here is very easy to test automatically. You can sort of create a question, say, let's run the question with this behaviour. Let's suppose the student gives this answer. Let's check that the system gives them a grade, the right grade. So, again, this is getting really techy, but the system has a lot of automated tests. What's happening there in those 3 seconds is the system just ran, several dozen questions with a whole lot of different behaviours and checked that the system gave it the correct score, that the correct feedback was displayed on the screen. I mean, it wasn't displayed on screen, it was all done behind the scenes. And this is really, really nice for me as a developer. I go in, I start changing something to try and fix a bug, and I just have to come to this page, reload it, 3 seconds later, I can be fairly confident I haven't broken anything that was working in the past. And once you have that level of sort of confidence that when you make a change, you can detect if you've broken anything, it gives you much more freedom to actually go in and clean things up. So, may not mean much to you as users, but to me as a developer, having really good tests is really important. Everything I've been talking about, yes, I agree. I was just going to show you that it did what? So on the Moodle Docs wiki under development, question engine 2, there is, well, a lot of this is what I wrote before I started, setting out exactly what I planned, and why I thought we needed to do this. It was me writing this quite detailed plan and rationale that led the OU to say, yes, we've got to do this, it's worth doing. The bits I've written more recently are down here, the sort of new system developer docs. Once this goes into Moodle, these 4 bits are how it works. So if you are a developer and you want to know, once this is released, how you to write a new question type, this is what you need to go and read. But don't actually go and look at it right now because I haven't finished writing it, but I promise I will. So that's all really sort of updating the system to this new way of thinking. At the same time, at the Open University, we've been doing some work on new question types. One thing I've changed is the essay question. A few new features that I hope you agree are nice and worth having. Well, this is kind of a plain essay question. It's going to be, if you've used the essay question before, that looks very familiar. If you go on to the next question, one of the new things you can see here, this question has a box that is a different size. So as a teacher, when you're setting up the question, very simple thing, but you can say how big is the box, and that is quite useful for just giving the students a bit of a hint about how much you're expecting them to write. You'll also notice in this question I've chosen to not use the HTML editor. Sometimes you want the students to style their response. In this case, maybe you just want them to focus on the words, not the pretty styling. And more significantly, the system will now let you have an attachment to an essay. Again, it's if the teacher wants to allow this. And that, again, lets you do things you couldn't do in the past. And this, just allowing attachments to essays is one thing, but the real point here is that the system as a whole can cope with responses to questions that include files. So what we actually want to do at the Open University, and we haven't quite worked out how to do it yet, is have a question type where the student sits there and clicks a button and records some audio or video into their computer, and that is their answer. And obviously our language faculty really want that. Hopefully we can actually deliver that. And another thing, here again, demonstrating a different size box, and you can something people struggle with at the moment is where they want students to type computer code, because Moodle gets confused between a less than sign, whether it's HTML or plain text. So we have an input type that's just plain text monotype-based font, which for people who are teaching programming, hopefully they'll find that one useful. The other reason to show these essay features is if we go and look at the essay grading interface. Someone was telling me yesterday that they felt that the workflow for teachers having to grade stuff in Moodle was a pain. So I had to update all the quiz reports when I was changing the system, and when it came to changing the grade report, I sort of looked at what was there and thought, this is not a very logical workflow. Oops, I got to the wrong place. Manual grading. So I hope the change I've made here hopefully just make it very clear. Here are all the questions in the quiz. Here are how many attempts need to be graded. And you can click and you get a page where you can grade them. That's sort of a very minor change, but I think it makes the workflow a bit neater. And when you're here, you can, whether the sort of student name is visible is something you can control with permissions. If you want to do anonymous grading, you can, and you can get it to order them in various ways. So when you get to the bottom and sort of do grades for this, it'll just go on to the next however many you've asked for. And the other thing you can do here, we can have this text here is something, again, when you created the question, you were able to put it, as the question creator, you can put in some text that is now displayed here in the grading interface to just remind people what the criteria are for grading this question. So another very simple little change, but I think quite useful. How am I doing for time? Okay, a little bit more time. We've got a bunch of other question types coming, which I'm just going to show you too. These are question types. We wrote the specification at the OU, but then we commissioned Jamie Pratt, who's a freelance Moodle developer who lives and works in Thailand, to develop them for us. We used him as well to do some changes to the quiz report. So one thing that really Moodle should have had for a long time is drag and drop question type. And here I've set it out as we've got a bug here. The box is just the wrong size. Fixing that one's going to be fun. But actually, I think that one's in our bug tracker. So we've got drag and drop, and so it could just be missing words in a paragraph of text. You can do various things with that. Here I sort of constructed an ordering question out of it. And as well as this that lets you put words into text, we're also going to have a similar one that lets you put words onto a diagram to label it, and also one where a sort of hotspot question. So you've got a diagram, you want to drag a marker to identify a key feature. This is another nice one that came out of some research that the OU's been doing over a number of years on grading. Moodle has the short answer question, has very simple pattern matching. And so that can grade, one or two words. You can probably get it to grade that. Here, this question type can cope with answers of up to about a sentence. And this is I think if you were here this time last year and saw my colleague Phil talking, he showed this question running in our other system called OpenMark. This is now it running in Moodle. Why does the oil float on the water? This is the wrong answer. So I just want to demonstrate that actually we've got feedback in here for various different types of response. Here's a typical sort of thing we do. It's the second go time we've got it wrong, so we're getting some extra information about which part of which course to go and read. But here, the first time it told us submit something. I don't think I've demonstrated this very well. Here it's picking up that what we said bears no relation to the question, so it's just giving us some very general feedback. Last time when I said something about density, it gave me some different feedback. So if we now get it right. Oops, try again. Hopefully it can detect that that is a correct answer to this question. Yay, I know basic physics. So obviously with a question like that, training Moodle to correctly distinguish the right and wrong answers, and if you want to pick up specific wrong answers and give specific feedback to them, that is quite a lot of work. It's all there in the Moodle editing form, but it still takes time. And really what you need to do, when they were setting this up, first time round, they ran this basically as an essay question. Students were typing in their responses, but Moodle was not grading it for them. Then you've got several hundred responses, and you sit down and you can construct some rules that grade the right answers right and the wrong answers wrong, and then you have a question. But you really need you need to find out what sort of things students type in response to this question before you try and construct the automatic marking rules. And obviously that does take a bit of time. You have to decide it's worth spending all that time creating the questions, because you will use them for a number of years with lots of students, and it will save you a lot of time later marking them. I mean, the OU, we have courses with like 2,000 students, and that's going to be run for 5 years. So it's worth spending a lot of time automating the grading of things like this. And it's not just automating it to save the time on humans marking it, it's automating it so students can get that immediate feedback, and if they've got it wrong, they can try and act on the feedback and get it right again. And is that... So just to wrap up, which is about time I did. So where have we got to now? Let's assume this does go into Moodle 2.1. If it's going to do that, I've got a few loose ends to finish before. Martin said Moodle 2.1 is going to be released at the end of June. That means I have to finish developing this by the end of May. So I've got a busy 5 weeks coming, but I think I can do it. Fingers crossed. Already in Moodle 2, a lot of the changes we made to the interface, I think now the experience as a student coming to a quiz, working through the questions is now very nice. And with Moodle 2, with all these different behaviours, that gives you much more richness in the type of experiences you can create for your students, the type of games you can create for them, if you like. The bit that still sucks is, as a teacher, going in and creating all this and setting it up is really clunky and a real pain. And hopefully it's worthwhile because the learning experiences you can create for your students are sufficiently sort of interesting and exciting and good practice for them. But we really need to improve that experience of how you set all this up. In particular, when you go in and edit a question, you get those really long forms with loads and loads of options, and we don't want to remove any of those options. They all have their uses, but we need to find some way of making it less daunting. So some of the options you do need, but not all the time, can be a bit more hidden until you need them. And the way questions are put in the question bank and shared and backed up and restored, there are some issues there that we need to solve as well. Those are sort of on our to-do list at the OU, but clearly they'll come after this block of work is being done. Well, the editing forms for questions, actually, my colleague Colin Chambers is working on right now. That, again, it's a nice separate problem. You can solve that problem independent of everything else. And then, we've got the quiz, which uses questions from the question bank. You've got the lesson that uses questions of its own sort. It would make much more sense if the lesson module could use the same questions from the question bank. And there are also many more interesting things you can do with more sort of social constructivist type activities. Maybe you have an activity where students can go and they can create questions, and then they go into a general question bank, and other students can use those questions for practice, and they can rate them, and then maybe students get a final mark for how many points they scored by attempting each other's questions, and how many points they scored for getting high rating on the questions they made. So, we've now got this really powerful question system, and I'd love to see more activities that use that power in interesting ways to construct educational activities. So I think that's where we are. Thank you very much. Well, one thing I didn't really mention, Moodle 2 already gives themes a lot more power to change things, and particularly in activities that present all the necessary hooks to give themes that power. And all this new stuff all the new stuff about questions follows that best practice. There are lots and lots of hooks. By making a theme, you could completely change how multiple choice question looks and make it much more fun, do more with custom backgrounds. So I think there's some potential there. There would be a certain amount, quite a lot of work in making a custom theme that did that. The other thing, of course, is so I'm just trying to get to an editing page. In Moodle 2, anywhere you're putting in content into a question, you've got the HTML editor, and you can... Oh, come on, load, slow thing. You know, in the question text, in the feedback, you can embed images, you can embed video, you can embed audio. So you can do that already. So and that gets you a long way. Well, surely if you want a learning object, shouldn't you be looking at the SCORM module? Well, okay, so SCORM, doesn't SCORM in Moodle 2 push the grades to the gradebook? Right. I mean, Right. So do you think the drag and drop question type helps there? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. Yeah. The themes thing is good. The point about question types is, you know, as you say, there's some good question types starting to emerge, and lots of people out there can do that. Kind of changing the core of the system, I think I have to do that. I'm hoping that other people out there will do the... Did you see Nick Freer had done a question type that was like sort of adding up but with pretty pictures? So it's like you've got 3 apples and 4 pears, how many bits of fruit have you got? With nice graphics. So, I mean, I'm hoping that I can rely on the community to make more fun question types, and I'm hoping one feature of this change is that it becomes slightly easier for developers to make question types, so we get more of them. Sorry, next question. Before we go through the front here.
Is there certainty based
That's what I demonstrated very briefly. Yes, up to a point. You've got one of the behaviours is do the question with certainty-based marking. It does the grading correctly. If you look at the kind of thing that Tony Gardner-Medwin has done, there are some extra bits we haven't got yet. Like when you finish the quiz and you go to the review page, he has a nice breakdown that, you know, you answered this many questions at this certainty level, and you got sort of 50% of them right, and really you should have been getting about 80% of them right at this certainty level, so you need to adjust your strategy there. So there are some bits like that that are missing and that, you know, perfectly possible to add when I get the time. So yeah, up to a point, yes, but it's not a finished system yet. Yeah. Exactly. As I say, I know exactly how I need to implement it, but I don't need that finished to get it into Moodle 2.1, so that will have to wait until I get the time. Okay. Next question at the back there.
Yeah, sorry, picking up really on something you said when you were running into the end, I have the same issue with it. My users don't teach thousands of students.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And they want this desperately, and they're going to run a mile from this because we haven't got the same usability in the editor that you're giving to the students when they're completing it. And there's 3 things that really I want to ask them.
Yep.
Bulk upload, conditional screens that deliver to the teachers that can also only that which is immediately relevant to what they're doing, and presets so that we can just give a pre-selected set of
Bulk upload we do have, don't we, in the question import?
Is that there already?
Yes. Presets. So upload, if you go to Question Bank, and this is already there in Moodle 1.9.4, go to Import. Moodle supports various formats. Akin is worth knowing. That's a really easy way to create a lot of multiple choice questions very quickly. And all these formats have documentation of greater or lesser quality. But Akin and Gift are the two that you can sort of author offline easily in a text editor and import. If you need to transfer questions from one Moodle site to another, use Moodle XML, because that's that will transfer questions exactly as they are. That includes all the settings. Some of these other formats are sort of simplifications, so they don't include all the options. In terms of presets, we don't really have presets, but if you go into site administration, quiz, you can set one global set of defaults for all the quiz settings. You can say, when you create a new quiz, what are the defaults? And you can decide which of these options are considered to be advanced fields. So you can hide quite a lot from your teachers until they click Show Advanced. I agree that a range of defaults you could choose from would be very worth having. And it's not too hard to implement, but it's not on the top of my to-do list, I'm afraid. But if someone wants to have a go at implementing that, there's a question of, should you implement presets just for the quiz, or should you come up with some system that lets you do presets for any type of activity? And then the third one, the middle one you asked for, the sort of wizard interface for creating quizzes would be very nice, but that would be a lot of work. So again, I'm not going to do it. If anyone wants to have a go, please do. Well, I'll hang around here if anyone has any questions now, and then probably we can continue discussion over lunch as well.